Hello friends, this will be everything you need to know before season 4 of the Marvelous Mrs Maisel. Alright, let's go! The first season starts off with Maryam Maisel, who's happily married to Joe Maisel, but that was before he cheated on her with his secretary. And surprisingly enough, this was a blessing in disguise. Here's why. After Joe left, her parents started giving her a bunch of useless advice, those parents being Abe, her father, and Rose, her mother. All that pressure and Joel constantly saying no to getting back together, Maryam goes down to the club called the Gaslight and performs comedy, and she's really good at comedy, unlike her husband Joel. While performing at the Gaslight, a worker by the name of Susie Meyerson sees something special in Maryam. But due to the fact that this is the 1950s and Maryam is a woman, she gets arrested for, being alive. Susie then takes the opportunity to get to know her by bailing her out. But while in jail, Maryam meets a guy by the name of Lenny Bruce, who's a very popular and controversial comedian but quickly becomes friends with Maryam. That being said, with the help of Susie, Maryam gets good at comedy but not good enough to get paid yet. She's also hiding the fact that she's a comedian from her parents and Joel because they would not approve, especially Joel because, well, he was a failed comedian. Anyways, when Joel's parents find out that Maryam and Joel have separated, Joel's father, Moish, takes away the apartment that they were living in because it turns out that Joel is broke and everything that he had was handed to him by his father. So Maryam and her two kids, Ethan and Esther, start living with her parents. That's when Joel comes back to Maryam to try to fix their relationship, but Maryam says no, respectfully so. A few nights later, while she was working one of her biggest nights at the Gaslight, Joel shows up and hears everything that she was talking about in her comedy, which is mainly their life and the fact that Joel is a terrible husband. The worst part about all of it all is that her and Joel were kinda getting back together until he saw the act, and the season ends with Joel admitting that Maryam is good at comedy, as well as Maryam signing off with her signature line.
My name is Mrs. Maisel. Thank you and good night.
Season 2 starts off with two things. The first thing is that Joel is upset about Maryam doing comedy and saying that they can't be together as long as she does comedy. His reasoning being that he doesn't want his name to be trashed in her comedy, even though he tried to do the same thing in the first episode of the first season. But anyways, the second thing is that Maryam's mother moves to Paris. She does this because she doesn't feel needed by both Maryam and Abe. But eventually, after going to Paris themselves, she comes back. And that brings us to the Catskills, which is basically a summer camp for rich grown-ups, which Maryam's whole family and Joel's whole family go every year. At this year's Catskills, Maryam meets this doctor by the name of Benjamin, who really likes her, and as it turns out, she likes him too. And the three quickly start dating, but three major things happen this season. The first thing that happens is that Maryam exposes this very powerful and popular comedian by the name of Sophie Lennon. In doing so, Sophie makes it really hard for Maryam to get a gig anywhere. The second thing is that Maryam's whole family finds out that she's a comedian, and even though they don't understand her, they tolerate it. And that brings us to the third thing, which is pretty complicated. But here's basically what happened. Maryam gets a gig on TV despite Sophie Lennon's efforts. During that gig, she does extremely well. So good that she meets this singer by the name of Shy Baldwin, who is extremely popular. After meeting Shy Baldwin, she also gets engaged to Benjamin a few days later. And because Maryam did so well on TV, Shy Baldwin calls her up asking her to go on tour with him. Obviously, she immediately said yes, but the season ends with her manager Susie getting a call to represent Sophie Lennon, her sworn enemy. And that brings us to season 3. Season 3 has both Maryam and Susie traveling with Shy Baldwin and his manager Reggie. And while those two are traveling back at home with the rest of the gang, here's what's going on. Joel decides to open his own nightclub and meets this girl by the name of May, and the two of them are kind of into each other. And in Joel's soon-to-be nightclub, there's illegal gambling happening in his basement. In the meantime, Rose and Abe, who are Maryam's parents, are living with Moish and Shirley, who are Joel's parents. And this is because Abe quit both of his jobs, and Rose gave up the money that her sexist family was giving her. So now they're broke and have nowhere to live. And that brings us to Susie and Maryam. Susie is managing Sophie, who wants to become an actress, and even though Sophie is not bad at acting, when the time came, she self-sabotaged herself, which made Susie cut ties with her. On the other hand, Susie's other client, Maryam, is doing really good. And she became such good friends with Shy Baldwin that Shy told her his real name, which is Dwayne, and that he was gay, which is a secret only her and Reggie know. Maryam then performs for Shy one last time before going back on tour. But sadly for her, that will be her last performance for Shy. And that's because during her last performance, she said a few things that Shy thought was exposing him. So, he cut her off.
You told her straight like that? Straight like that!
Also, even though Maryam was engaged to Benjamin by the end of season 2, she ended things with him to start traveling with Shy. I really liked Benjamin. He was a good guy. And the season ends with Abe potentially getting a job as a theater critic, and both Susie and Maryam not knowing what to do after being left high and dry. And yeah, I hope I covered everything you wanted to know, but if I didn't, don't be afraid to leave a question. That's it. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you liked that video and want to see more like it, leave a like and subscribe. Adios!